where everybody is joining from. I am calling in from the Parsons campus in Manhattan. We've got Ohio, Newark, North Carolina, India, Queens, Brooklyn, Sweden, already getting global. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing. Amazing. If you're joining us for the very first time, I am so happy to welcome you to Remake. Remake is a nonprofit organization uniting change makers in the fight for human rights and climate justice in the clothing industry. And we're just so grateful to have you on our community call today and to welcome you in to our community and share this message with you and this movement with you. My name is Emily McKay. I am a former community organizer for Remake and current education intern with Remake. I've been working with Remake for many years and am deeply dedicated to their work and this movement. And I'm so happy to be able to host our incredible panel for today. But before we jump into that, I'm just going to start off with a little bit of housekeeping. So, I mean, I can't believe it's May already. This is kind of insane, but with May, next comes June. June 1st is quickly approaching, meaning we will be kicking off Remake's 90-day No New Clothes Challenge. Those familiar will hopefully be very excited for our favorite time of year, No New Clothes time. So although you can take the challenge any time of the year, No New Clothes is always better with a friend, always better in community. So from June until August is the perfect time to participate with the community of remakers. And the purpose of this challenge is to stop and consider the values of what we want to wear and the role that we can play as individuals in addressing overconsumption to change the fashion industry for the better. So the goal this summer is to get 5,000 new challenge takers to take the pledge. You can sign up and share the No New Clothes link that Holly is going to drop in the chat. Thank you, Holly. Yeah, so exciting with No New Clothes time approaching. We also have some really exciting upcoming programs with the Remake team. So Remake is teaming up with Shop Repurpose on May 14th for a collaborative workshop called Mindful Fashion, exploring how secondhand shopping helps reduce waste, how you can find the perfect new to you outfits, and how changing your consumption habits can make an impact on the fashion industry as a whole. And we'll share the link to that in the chat, as well as on May 15th, you can join Remaker Jasenia virtually for a screening of the really eye-opening documentary, The True Cost, followed by a lively discussion. Also, our Amsterdam Hub community organizers are going to be bringing everybody together for a fun-filled evening at our virtual sustainability trivia night. That's going to be on May 21st. And for info about these programs and more happening on the ground in a community near you, Holly is dropping the link to our events page that is updated weekly. And finally, we just wanted to say a huge thank you to all of our Remake Gems, Give Every Month, who make our Changemaker program resources and workshops possible and free for all. You are keeping this work alive. It is rough out there. We all know it. And so we really do want to share our appreciation for you. And if you're not already a Remake Gem or in the Remake Gem Club, help us grow our movement, create stronger resources, and build a more resilient Remake community by becoming a Remake Gem today. And again, that link will be in the chat. And now we will get jumping into the call, which I'm so excited about. So celebrations of motherhood can be traced back to ancient Greece, Rome, where festivals were held in honor of goddesses. And in celebration of Mother's Day and Indigenous history, our panel today explores the rich intergenerational knowledge passed down through women, from the quiet power of handwork to the resilience of ancestral traditions. Today, we will honor skills, stories, and wisdom of mothers, grandmothers, and matriarchs across the world and across cultures. We'll delve into how Indigenous practices, craft, and care-based work not only preserve cultural identity, but also offer blueprints for sustainable, community-centered futures, especially in the fashion industry. So through the lens of lived experience, our speakers will share how they've been keeping traditions alive, adapting them for today, and reclaiming the value of women's work in all its forms. We honor the incredible knowledge passed down through generations of women, the skills of our hands, the power of storytelling, and the ancestral traditions that shape our identities, our creativity, and our communities. And fashion is truly, truly, I think, one of the main industries that often takes advantage of women's wisdom, and we're here to change that. Our speakers today are three visionary women whose work honors the ancestral, the handmade, and the deeply personal. So first, I am so excited to introduce designer and remake fellow Angel Chang. She draws from Indigenous craftsmanship and ancient techniques in the mountains of China, creating clothing that's rooted in zero carbon traditional practices. Second, my friend and collaborator, entrepreneur extraordinaire, Siamanda, who I'm so excited is here today. She is the founder of Bibi Ravi. She uplifts East African artisans through ethical production that centers handwork, motherhood, and heritage. And finally, I'm so excited to introduce scholar and curator Hazel Clark, who brings a deep academic lens to the cultural significance of fashion, craft, and the politics of making. And we encourage you all to engage with the panelists throughout the discussion, and please feel free to drop questions for our Q&A session at the end. You can drop those in the chat. And thank you again for joining us today. I'm so excited to get started. So let's begin by honoring the women who came before us. Can each of you share a memory, maybe of a mother, grandmother, or elder who passed down a skill or a story that continues to influence your work today? And maybe I'll pass it to Angel first.
Hi, Emily. Thanks so much for inviting me here to talk about this really important topic. Hi, everyone. So the first thing that in terms of what I remember from my mother is when I was little, I loved shopping. And well, when I was a little kid, I loved new dresses. And when we would go to the mall, she'd be like, oh, you don't need to buy that dress. It's too expensive. I'll just make you one at home, and I'll make you 10 of them in all different colors. And of course, you know, when you're little, you want the new shiny thing. I didn't want to have my mom sew it for me. So the funny thing is, you know, we would go to Joanne Fabrics, and we would buy the fabric, and then we would go home and she would draft the pattern. And then within a week, we'd have the dress and I would wear it. And I was so, I guess, embarrassed by having something that my mother made. But the weird thing is I eventually started learning how to sew when I turned 9 years old. And then now I do sew all my clothes. And I have like multiple pieces, just like she recommended. And I just wear them every day like a uniform.
That's so incredible. It's just making me smile. Siamanda, I'm going to pass it to you next.
Hi, Emily. Thanks for having me over, and hi, everyone. This is so exciting. I love talking about my grandmother. I carry a memory of my late grandmother who wove sisal baskets in the warm glow of Kenyan sunset. They would sit on the floor, on the ground, and all the other women would get together and just put together these baskets that were so functional. They sang songs as they weaved together the baskets, and they chatted and talked, and it was such a great activity and a joyous activity. And it wasn't entrepreneurship, it wasn't art, it didn't have a name. It was just simply life. It was just what they did with so much joy. And that kind of memory stays with me because it sort of was it was meaningful, it was survival. And the spirit of that I carry that with me all the time as I create what I create with our women in Kenya today.
That is so beautiful. Thank you. And Hazel, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone, from New York. So when I was thinking about this question, what came to mind was actually as a kind of broader context. Just for reference, I was brought up in the northeast of England in a small working class community. And what was striking me when I was thinking about, and it was a very female community, but it was that sense of community, the sense of community amongst women, elders, mothers, grandmothers, but also neighbors, friends, and also how important to them the spoken word was, how knowledge and emotions, for example, were transmitted every day, all the time through words. And then I think, and again, this is echoing Simanda's words and Angel's, also the importance of cloth, making, knitting, sewing, crochet, but cloth as creativity, not just as function. And then related to that, the importance of clothes and creativity in lives. So it was that sort of stringing together of that sense of something that was enclosing and encompassing, and actually until you'd asked the question, I hadn't realized how much it has and does influence my past and current work.
Oh, yeah, that's so beautiful and makes so much sense. When we reflect on these things, we realize how much they have affected our and driven our whole lives. So let's dive in even further and explore what drives all of your work. So to Angel first, your designs are deeply rooted in ancient textile techniques, all made by hand using local natural materials. How do you see these methods as a form of resistance or reclamation in today's fast fashion world?
Yeah, so it actually started as an act of resistance. I at the time, well, I had been working in China for 5 years and then wasn't making any money training the artisans. So I did a really short stint at Lululemon in Vancouver. I was head designer for the lab, which is like their research or innovation incubator. And they brought me to revive, to bring craftsmanship to the brand and also to bring sustainability to the brand, which, was honorable. But what I realized as the months went by is that their quality control requirements were so high, like they required 500 washings where the color wouldn't fade and wouldn't pill. And, you can only do that with chemical dyed plastic textiles like their Luon, like polyester. You can't do that with natural fibers. So I couldn't actually bring these sustainable fibers that they wanted into the company. And then, after some time, there were a lot of people let go, and I was one of the ones let go as well. They were doing a shift in management. And that night I went home and I realized then the importance of going back to China and working with the artisans because they were making everything, by hand. They were growing their cotton, which was heritage seed cotton. They were like hand spinning it, hand weaving it. And it had, at that time, I was just reviving the traditional craft because it was disappearing in the next decade. And so I received a grant from the Smithsonian to create prototypes for this next collection. And let me just turn off the air conditioner. This is really bad that I have AC on because I'm actually challenging myself not to use AC.
That's honorable.
Yeah, it was 105 degrees today. Anyways, when I received this grant from the Smithsonian, I made these prototypes. And I said, okay, I had this crazy dream where I want to create everything without electricity because the electricity would go out every 3 days, and it was we're so remote that was hard to also ship in zippers and buttons. So I said, okay, let's do it all in traditional way where we have to make everything from the land, and the grandmothers know how to do everything, and let's just do it like how clothing was made 200 years ago. I know it sounds absolutely crazy, but this is like haute couture, like on the extreme where everything is hand sewn, but also the fabric is like hand woven and handmade. And so after like 2, 3 months, we had these samples. And when I finished it, I realized that everything was made in this one village. We grew it. Anyway, it had a zero carbon footprint. And I was really shocked because how is it that there were all of these fast fashion brands that were trying to do sustainable clothing, and they had all of their financial resources and their huge teams, and yet here I was with no money and a bunch of grandmothers, and we were actually creating this stuff. Like I got really angry because I was like, why I did it? It was so easy, and these huge corporate brands can't figure it out. So then I realized, okay, I gotta go back, start my line. And then I came back to New York, did the TED Talk. And then, yeah, that was how my line started. And I did this, my first style was called the anti-T because I, at TED, created this animation called the environmental, well, it was the life cycle of a t-shirt. And I learned how horrible, how high the carbon footprint it was of just your basic conventional tea. It made me really depressed. And so I made the anti-tea, which is the total opposite. And so that was how the collection started.
That is so, so inspiring. Thank you for your work, and thank you for being here to share about it. I'm gonna pass it off to Siamanda next. So the women artisans that you work with in East Africa are not only makers, they are mothers, cultural carriers, and community leaders. How do you see handwork and the work that they're doing as a form of empowerment and also cultural preservation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the women I work with, mainly in Kenya, are the embodiment of resilience. I work with a lot of women who were survivors of gender-based violence, living with HIV, and most of them are single mothers. And every stitch or every bead or every weave holds a story. When they get together, they talk about the stories of the stories of what they go through every day and how much empowering it is to be together and be able to create these beautiful products that they create. So handwork is their language of resistance and renewal. It offers not only the financial freedom to them, but it also ensures that this century-old work that they've learned from their grandparents, it continues. So that they can also pass on to their children, sustaining the old traditions of crocheting, hand knitting, and weaving. And so that is their resilience, I would say.
Yeah. And one of the things I think Siamanda and I have done quite a bit of work together, speaking lots about the work with her incredible team of women in Kenya. And I think one of the big things that always stands out to me is the integration of their lives as mothers with their work, and bringing children to where they're working and having that be such a welcoming experience is really, really beautiful. And how do you think motherhood and your experience of being a mother has played a role in the way that you lead, design, and connect with community?
Actually, I started Baby Ravi once I became a mother. When I went back to Kenya, I experienced the poverty and how the women lived, and it hit me differently. Now I was a mother, and I thought, what if only it was only by the grace of God that I was not in that village, not knowing what to feed my child tomorrow. And so when everything I do, it transformed how I showed up for the women, not only in what I would design for them to make. A story continued, but also how it would affect them in everything that they did, like interweaving the products that we did. So as you said, one of the things was to make sure that the women are in a safe space. It was that the working conditions were good for them, and also giving them the opportunity to be able to work at their own hours, and also to bring their children to work if they could. So this part of it was like, what if I was at home and I didn't have there's no babysitter. Would I leave and I was a single mother, would I leave my child at home? What if my child was sick? Could I bring them to work? So everything I do is around what I would want to have myself as a mother, and that would be a positive for my children. Also, that would be safe for my children and me as well.
That's so beautiful. And passing it over to Hazel now, you've studied the cultural significance of making for a long time, not just as a form of design, but as a social and political act. What role does handcraft play in maintaining cultural identity, and especially for women in the fashion industry?
Well, I think handcraft is important, and again, resonating with what we've just heard, to continue lineages and traditions, and to value what went before, to value ancestors and skills. I mean, one of the problems is in our contemporary world, or in modernity, and particularly related to fashion and textiles, is just this, as Angel was saying, this increase of mass-produced things in our lives, and making us forget just the power that handmade items can have. One little example that came to mind in response to this question was just thinking about back to 2017 in this country, but also in other parts of the world, the Women's March on Washington, and the wearing of handmade so-called pussy hats, and just how those items of clothing, which were, they weren't transactional in any way. They weren't, well, they were subsequently produced in the market, but patterns were shared online. Women were making them for themselves, for others, and just that relationship to power and identity and politics and resistance and craft was extremely powerful. And I think also in recent years, it's been very powerful how younger women and men have been returning to or learning skills like knitting or crochet, to sort of re-engage with those traditions of handmaking, which have not necessarily been sustained for commercial gain at all, but been sustained in the domestic sphere, and often for need as much as want. And thinking about Angel and her mum making her dresses, for example.
Yeah, that's so, so true. It makes me think of my Nana, who made all of mine and my sister's clothes. We always ended up matching. She made all of our pieces to match. And the way in which that she would approach that was definitely a mixture of both the need and also wanting to provide for her family. And it's so beautiful to think about fashion in a non-transactional way, because I feel like that's often not the case. Question to all three of you, and whoever wants to jump in first, feel free. How do you navigate honoring traditional knowledge while also innovating or adapting to contemporary needs? And how do you think tradition and modernity can coexist through your work? Whoever wants to go first.
Well, I can jump in. I mean, one way I do that is by writing about it, and by bringing to presence women who've gone before, and yeah, honoring their work, and giving us knowledge of their work, and thinking about this this particular instance of tradition and modernity. Some years ago, I was looking at the work of crafts women in textiles in the UK and in the US. I don't have to go into the examples, but it was very much, their work was between the two world wars. It was in the 1930s, very much a period concerned with, so-called modernity and progression. But what they were doing, they were being modern in their own way. They were working in craft workshops, small workshops, producing hand-block textiles. So I think we've got to be very careful about, thinking that modernity erased tradition, or that there is not a place for tradition within modernity. And modernity is not just one thing anyway, as we, of course, we know. And I think we're in a stage now in human existence, in some ways, thankfully, that we are recognizing the complexities of modernities, and that modernity is certainly not just a Western patriarchal model that needs to be imposed elsewhere. So that's just maybe a general comment to begin.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for that. Yeah, Angel, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in, and it's interesting you mentioned honoring, because I like to replace that with reviving or sustaining instead, because there is a sense of urgency to working with traditional knowledge. It's not, for me, it's not just having grandmother's hand sew in the mountains. Really, the bigger picture is that of the 7,000 languages that are being spoken around the world right now, nearly half of them are going to disappear in our lifetime. And with it, the knowledge of how to live sustainably with the earth and with nature. And so it's really incumbent upon our generation to learn that knowledge and then pass it down to the next generation. And how do we do that? It's something as simple as talking to the elders, speaking to grandmothers, asking about their lifestyle before, and then even going onto YouTube and seeing how textiles were made in the past. Like, I'm obsessed with how people lived, or how civilizations were created without electricity. I mean, it's like insane. And that was just 150 years ago, 3 generations back. So how do I navigate that while innovating to contemporary needs? Well, one of the pieces I designed is called the it's called the Palazzo Pant, Biasa Palazzo Pant. And it's named after this village where our fabric is, the cotton is grown and woven. And all the men, everyone in the village, actually, they all wear a uniform. And it's this indigo dyed, uh, it's, how do you say, everyone wears these indigo outfits. All the women have these pleated skirts, and all the men have like this asymmetrical jacket and these wide pants, kind of like a farmer pant. And the cotton is grown locally from heritage seed cotton, and then it's hand spun and hand woven, and the mother makes all of their outfits. And then the kids wear the same outfit, and the adults wear the same outfit, I mean, in larger sizes. So those pants that the men wear, I loved them so much that I made the women's version of them. And so that meant just creating the waistline higher. That's all I did. And adding some buttons on the side to help with the closure. And as I was making the pattern and drafting it out, I realized that their pants, their traditional pants, were made based off of the width of the fabric, which is 38 centimeters. And so they had minimal fabric waste. They were just taking the width of the fabric and then just cutting it, and then that was it. And it was zero waste by default. It wasn't like they were trying to be sustainable, right? But then I thought about it. I was like, yeah, like if it takes you, 5 months to grow that cotton, and then like another 2 months to weave it, and then like another month to dye it, you're talking about like 7, 8 months now just to make the fabric before you start sewing it. So of course, you're not going to want to throw away any of that fabric. You're going to use every precious scrap of it. So yeah, that's I guess how I tried to revive that pant.
I love that the flip of the language there is really, really powerful. And that really is kind of the embodiment of slow fashion, learning from these traditions and actually continuing to implement them. That's really beautiful. See, Amanda, do you have any thoughts on this question as well?
Yeah, for me, I feel that tradition and modernity, or innovation, are not at odds. I feel like there can be dance partners. I look at the work we do with the women, for example, with beadwork, and it comes from, the Maasai women just making beads for their, for traditional, for weddings, or to as a wearable, as a necklace, and how we are able to translate it to or reimagine it in a way where it fits the international global market in a dress. And so I feel like the past just offers us that rich texture, techniques, and stories. And then innovation invites us, or requires for us to just reframe it and make it usable today, but just using the same techniques. So I feel they go together, just reimagined.
Yeah, that is so true. So, so true. And again, to everybody, to all of our incredible panelists, how do you think that we can better center and uplift the wisdom of women? And this, goes along with everything we've already been talking about, but particularly mothers, matriarchs in spaces like design and academia and business. I mean, so, so often. And this is probably one of the biggest things that I have learned, and I'm sure a lot of other people have learned from the remake community, is that the voices of women are the voices who are silenced in the fashion system, as well as so many other systems in our world. And so I'm really curious on all of your thoughts on how do you think what do you think is the path forward for centering and uplifting the women's wisdom?
Okay, I can say, for me, what I realize is just giving monetary compensation for their knowledge to signify that it has value. And the reason why I say this is because I work in these ethnic minority villages where they're marginalized communities, and they are told from a very early age that their culture is backwards, that they didn't have a written language, and that they need to become more sophisticated, like the majority race, which is the Han in Chinese. They make up 92% of the population. And so these ethnic minorities, they are very, I would say, insecure and feel very, do not feel confident with their culture. And so when I first went into the villages, the grandmothers asked me, why are you asking to see our fabric? Like, why? Because nobody asks them, no one cares. They only make fabric for themselves, for their families. And then, like when 20 years ago, when textile collectors from the big museums started coming in, they would just give them the fabrics. They were giving museum quality fabrics away because they didn't see the value. And I started buying their fabric, and suddenly it gave them a reason to weave again, and it gave them a reason to revive it. And they started to wear the fabric themselves. And that is so important, because now even my weaver, she has turned into like a business person herself. She's going to everybody's homes and knocking on their doors looking for fabric that's woven, and I can see how more confident and empowered she is just from that. So that's on the artisan level. But even for myself, my entire life I always designed for a brand, and in my always designed for brands. And so during the pandemic, when I finally launched my line, it was the first time that someone paid money, like where I was financially compensated for my vision and for my design. And someone actually paid money and for me to ship them my design. And that was like really shocking for me, because it's different when it's like a paycheck from a brand because you're just doing a job job. But for me, this was like my passion, my vision, something that I'd spent 10 years working on. And someone said, it wasn't like press, because like when a newspaper or magazine writes about it, like that's free, right? So anyone can do that. But when someone actually gives their hard-earned money for something that you want to share, it's really empowering.
I mean, all I can say is amen to that. See, Amanda.
Yeah, the way we do it at the village is creating spaces for women to lead. So just they don't understand, they don't really know their strengths unless you put them in that position where for every for every 10 women, for example, you're the leader because you're really good at, just giving them that space so that they can understand that they can be in that position of power, and then as Angel said, also compensating them in a different setting where they're like, okay, now I'm the manager and I can also train, and then having them train other managers, and also giving them, for example, when we create product, we usually sit down with them as we are creating the product and allow them to dictate or to tell us, what do you think this would, what's your thoughts on pricing? What's your thought on how can we better improve? And just giving them that space to realize that they really have power, a space that they are not given mostly in places where they're just supposed to work and not saying what they think, or just what if they of their opinion does not count. So for us, for me, that's the way I see it. Just creating the spaces or creating these rooms that women can actually be able to voice and share and have some form of authority.
That is so, so crucial. Hazel, did you want to jump in at all?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I would say added to that, in academia, we have we're in powerful positions to, again, share knowledge and create knowledge. And I was just thinking of, some organizations or communities that have been established. I mean, Remake in itself is obviously a good example, but been established over the last few years. For example, the Research Collective for Decoloniality in Fashion, or the Union of Concerned Researchers in Fashion, which are global communities, self-selected people who are looking at fashion in ways that are way beyond that which is dictated by the fashion system, and tend to be mostly, populated by women scholars and thinkers and creators. So I think there are kind of more horizontal ways of the way that people are communicating now, partly due to the pandemic too, which are facilitating knowledges being created and shared. And also exhibitions. I mean, it sounds very prosaic, but exhibitions can be very powerful in sharing. Certainly my friend and colleague in South Africa, Erica de Greff, she's been very instrumental in her work, but also in the United States, for example, there's an exhibition now traveling called Designing Motherhood, Things That Make or Break Our Birth, co-curated by Michelle Miller-Fisher, who works at the Museum of Fine Art in Boston, and Amber Winnick. And there's also a book. I mention that because that project for them initially was a labor of love. Sorry for the pun, didn't mean to say labor, but you know what I'm saying. And it was one that they found very, very difficult to get into established museums, even the museum where Michelle worked, if it's not not inappropriate to say that. And gradually, through their perseverance, this exhibition is now coming to New York. It's traveling around the country. So I think in a sort of public sense, writing, education, but also exhibitions are a way of sharing different knowledges and honoring knowledges which are, as our other speakers were saying, are very anonymized, and by that very much have been lost and in danger of being lost.
Yeah, that's so, so true. I think often we don't think about the power that so many different mediums of fashion communication hold, and exhibitions are such a brilliant example of one of them, just one of the many. One example that you made me think of as well was the, I can't remember exactly what it was called. I think it was maybe What Women Wore or something along those lines, that was at the New York Historical Society. It was the first time I had ever seen maternity wear or any sort of women's at-home wear in a museum setting. And I didn't realize how powerful that was going to be until you see it in person. So those things really, really are so powerful.
Just to jump back in on that one, because I've just written a review of that exhibition. It's still on if anyone wants to see it, if they're in New York. It's called Real Clothes, Real Lives. And it's from this wonderful collection at Smith College, which has not really been publicized. And there's a wonderful book as well. So and I completely agree with Emily that it was unusual to see, for example, the uniform from the 1970s for a maternity uniform for a McDonald's worker, as well as other things. So yeah, and that, interestingly, from what I hear from colleagues in the museum, that exhibition has been really popular, which is very good to know.
Yeah.
Thanks for highlighting that too.
Yes. And again, to everybody, ancestral knowledge often offers us sustainable practices that we need now more than ever. What lessons from the past do you believe are the most urgent to bring forward today, especially in the face of climate change and social inequality that is so perpetuated by the fashion industry? Whoever wants to jump in first.
Oh, I think you skipped a question.
Did I skip a question?
Yeah, because I had an important report that I wanted to share.
I want you to share it. I want you to share it.
Your question was, what is the most important environmental issue we face today, and what steps should individuals or businesses take to address it?
Where did I miss it? Well, let's go back to that.
It was and so because I had it ready the
I
report.
love that you're holding me accountable.
So I'll just answer it.
Just go for it
now.
because I literally can't see it on this. I'm going blind on this.
Okay, so the most important environmental issue is that we think as a society, or people are telling us that technology is going to save us, and it absolutely is not. And AI is not going to save us either. And if you think of like all the things that we fear, like constant surveillance, agentic AI, stealing our data, all of that stuff, like none of that exists when there's no electricity. And what happens when nature pulls the plug? Then what happens? Like we have no survival skills. Like, we don't know how to farm. We get everything at the supermarket. We don't know how to make our own clothes. We don't know how to, like, how are we going to survive? When I'm in these villages, I see them, and even when the kids are 4 years old, they already know how to start planting rice, and so their families are never going to starve, even if there's like another global pandemic. It's us in the cities that are going to die first, before these indigenous people in these agrarian societies do, or in the forest, who have the survival skills to live with the earth and with nature. So for me, it's about reconnecting people back with nature. 90% of Americans spend 90% of our day indoors, and that means that we are always in a man-made environment, climate-wise, and so our bodies never adjust to whatever temperature it is outside, right? Inside, the thermostat is always 72 degrees. But the thing is, we're not aligned with nature, and so then we don't eat the foods in season that we need to either heat up our bodies or naturally cool down our bodies. And then, we wear these like plastic textiles. We don't know that this polyester is how do you say, it doesn't allow our skin to breathe, right? And there are all of these issues, and our bodies are not sensitive to it. We can't feel it because we're in this artificial environment inside. And that's why I'm not using air conditioning, even though it was 105 degrees outside today. Everyone in India uses big fans. And so the report that I sent is from the Hot and Cool Institute. And it's about how we have to move towards or transition to a 1.5 degree sustainable lifestyle. And that means, we have to reach half our carbon footprint by 2030 and by 90% by 2050. But no one is telling us how to do that in our daily lives, right? So we're all talking about, oh, suck carbon out of the air, like do all this like high-tech stuff. But what would be most impactful is if, you know, we reduce our meat consumption, which everyone knows. It's like 25% of carbon emissions globally. And then also just to not use so much air conditioning, right? As it applies to clothing as well, there's a personal reason why you want to do this, because I was just, I'm in India and I was just in Kerala working with these Ayurvedic dyers. They're like these 6th generation Ayurvedic dyers who are also Ayurvedic doctors, and they also were weavers. And they said these herbs and these plant dyes, they are most potent and impactful when they are dyed in the season that they are blooming, right? And then that also means that you should wear them in the season that those flowers bloom. And that just totally blew my mind, because I had no idea. I just wear whatever color any day of the week, any day of the month. And so, yeah, this is something we need to reduce or learn how to live a 1.5 degree sustainable lifestyle. Yes. So read the report. It's
Yeah.
very important.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you. Thank you. And I'll pass it off to either Simona or Hazel. Any thoughts or insights that you want to share to do with like all of the topics that we've been talking about today and how those can be applied in the face of climate change and social inequality?
I'll jump in. So one of the issues that I see in the part of the world that I come from is we get a lot of secondhand clothing that is dumped from obviously overproduction by the fast fashion companies because of the fast fashion, and it all ends up in landfills. And I think it's very unfortunate, because the more they buy, the more you buy, the fast fashion produces, the more of a consumption, the more then is sent to us, the more it ends up destroying the environment for us, I believe. And I think to shift this, like, individuals must embrace mindful consumption, also buying less and local. And I think that's where artisanal work, like valuing craftsmanship, would really work, because then what we create as artisans can last longer. You don't have to buy everything, something every day. And that's probably, I think would be a really great solution, where sustainability just stops being just a buzzword, but the standard, so that consumers can ask questions of who made my clothes, and where will this end, and how long will this last me? That would be my suggestion.
Yes, absolutely.
I think, just adding to that briefly, I mean, we certainly need more informed language and greater awareness on all sorts of levels. And following Samanda's point, reminded me last week I was at a talk by the Danish designer Henrik Bibskov, and he was sharing that apparently in Denmark now you can't use the word sustainability because it doesn't mean anything, basically. But I think, it's also like really just heightening awareness of our lives, and taking Angel's point, the fact that AI actually and lots of other things use a lot of power, and that power just doesn't come from nowhere. And I mean, it's a bit like, the dumped clothing. Things don't come from nowhere. Everything's got a root. It's like talking about lineages of people and ancestors. And I think there needs to be greater awareness. And of even origins. And I mean, perhaps one of the ironies in this country, in the world at the moment, of these kind of strange and seems ill-formed tariffs, is actually it is drawing awareness to where things come from, which is so curious things come forward. But we do need awareness of origins of so many aspects of our human lives, I think, today. So maybe that's just my
Yeah. Yeah, that is so crucial, and something that I think about all the time, of how hidden so much of the fashion supply chain is. And even as transparency becomes such a huge buzzword along with sustainability, the average person doesn't want to sort through a massive ESG report or transparency report. And so the stories of where our things come from, fashion or otherwise, remain unknown. And that also extends to the disposal, the end of life. And I think so much of the wisdom that we can learn from so many like Indigenous communities especially is this connection to the entire life cycle of everything around us. I'm gonna jump into our last question, and in the meantime, wanted to put it out there to our community here today. If you have any questions for our incredible speakers that you want to pop in the chat, please do. And while everybody's doing that, I'll pose our last question to you all. If you could pass down one piece of wisdom, whether that's a lesson, a practice, or a mantra, or anything that you want to pass down to the next generation of makers, thinkers, and leaders, what would it be?
Oh, I have a lesson. Actually, I have many, but one that's related to the last question is so ancient China dominated the seas in like they had these huge giant ships made out of wood that could sail for 6 months across the Pacific, and they were in America before Columbus came. So it's really crazy how they were able to like the Mayflower um, could only like have enough provisions or food for like a 1 month journey, like with the potatoes and all that stuff. But the Chinese, they could go for 6 months, and this is like in the 1400s, right? And so what's insane is that there's one food that is just like if you could just survive on one food, what would it be? And for the people on this ship, they took soybeans, and soybeans is like magic because first of all, you can sprout it, right? Like make bean sprouts. And so that was really good for scurvies because sailors always got sick from scurvies. But then you can also make tofu, and you can make soy milk, and you can make soy sauce, and you just keep growing. And just it's like having a grocery store on your ship, and this is in the time long before electricity and this like man-made power or fossil fuel power was invented. And so yeah, that just blew me away. And then the second one is everyone should meditate and learn how to meditate because that's brings us back to nature because we are part of nature. And when we're so distracted by social media, we start to lose touch with that. So meditation brings us back. And when we put our feet on the ground, we can align better with the magnetic energy of the earth. And yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that.
My wisdom for the future makers would be let's create not just for today, but tomorrow's memory. Let's just not take, but also give back. Let's return to the model of stewardship where we just don't take from the earth, but we tend it so that those that come after you will also be thankful as we are thanking our ancestors, as we remember the ones who came before us. So that would be my wisdom for future makers.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And mine is quite short, and I think it's very much been represented by the work of both Angel and Samanda. It's just this short advice to be the change you seek. And that was actually not from a wise woman, but from a very wise man, Mahatma Gandhi. And I think, both our other speakers have proved how that actually is possible, even in this world, and by women. So thank you both for your words and sharing.
Yes, and thank you for that. And that is so, so crucial to keep top of mind when so much of what we see in the news every day and all around the world, but especially here in the US, where it can feel hopeless a lot of the times. And to remember that we do have the power to create the world that we want to see is so empowering. And it's even more empowering when we do it in community. And that's why I'm personally so grateful for the Remake community, and I hope you all feel the same. If anybody has any last questions that they wanted to share in the chat, please feel free. But I just wanted to share how grateful I am for all three of you being here today. I think this has been such a fascinating and uplifting conversation. And I'm just so grateful to get to share in this space of community with all three of you and to everybody who's joining the call today. It's been really, really empowering and amazing. So I'm very, very grateful for you being here and sharing your time and your wisdom with us, your women's wisdom with us. So yes, today's conversation reminds us that women's work, often quiet, often undervalued, it holds just worlds within it. And whether that's through weaving, writing, community building, women's wisdom continues to shape more just and more beautiful futures. And everybody, please check out the links in the chat, the report that Angel shared, and all of the work that these three incredible women are doing. And we hope that you leave feeling inspired to reconnect with your own lineage, skills, and stories, and to honor the women whose wisdom lives within all of us. And thank you so much for joining us today. Keep supporting the advocates that are making change, not just this month, but every single day. And we're wishing you a grounding and uplifting month ahead, filled with community care and joy. We'll see you in June for the official launch of No New Clothes. I hope everybody feels really, really empowered to celebrate an incredible Grounded Mother's Day this month. And we will see you all in June. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Happy early Mother's Day.
Is it possible to ask a question? I'm trying to write it out, but it's just not happening in time. Would that...
Absolutely. Yes, please, Tess.
Sorry, it's so hard for me to listen and write at the same time.
That is
So,
so fair.
thank you. And thank you so much for this panel and insight. I really want to ask the panel, because I'm a small business endeavoring to be as purist and sustainable as possible, and realize in this journey how incredibly daunting that is and disillusioning. And there's just like one contradictory effort after another. And mainly, I would love to understand from your experience of building business and making it profitable, how you combat actually having that growth mindset for your business. You want it to succeed, but then you realize that the means of which for it to succeed in a capitalist system requires you to sell thousands upon thousands of units. So how do you not constantly want to just undermine your own success because you're endeavoring to do something good for the world? You need it to succeed in order for anyone to even hear or understand it's making a difference, but then you realize you're just contributing at the end of the day to the exact same mess. And so specifically regarding like the profitability of a business, I would love to understand that from a business owner's point of view.
Yes, so I can answer that if you don't mind. Yeah, I get that question all the time because I pitch a lot of investors and they're always asking about scalability, and investors are mostly usually men who are investing in companies. So they're like, how are you going to go big and like scale up? And the thing is, I think you can't do what's already been done because the fashion industry was born out of the Industrial Revolution, which is all about extraction of nature. And that was a time when factories were created and you had all these worker labor issues and child labor issues. And so you can't do what has been done in the past. And it means you have to really innovate. And for me, for example, like when people ask me, how are you going to scale up? It's not about increasing production in one village. I'm not making a factory, but I see that there are communities around the world that can make clothing in the same exact way. And so for me, scaling out is going across, 10 different countries, across 5 continents, and everyone can still hand sew the clothing, and it'll take, months to make each piece. But now you're spreading the jobs out to a much more, a higher number of artisans. And so you're giving jobs, you're contributing to their livelihood. And so this is where impact measurements are really important, because this means you're not, how do you say, the traditional way of doing business, modern business, is that they just look at profitability, right? But then now you want to look at social impact, like how many jobs you just choose whatever that is. It could be how many jobs you're given, or how many kids you're educating, or you just choose one marker and you just measure it. And then now you're in the world of like social responsibility and social business. And yeah, you got to think creatively and in a way that feels more empowering to you.
So that's how you ultimately,
And you can be
well, I
profitable
don't,
that way.
you can be profitable, and what about the part about that guilt of, I mean, what you're doing is so incredible. And it feels obviously kind of intimidating to go that length, due to resources and access and everything of a very small business owner, starting like bootstrapping it. So, but with the concept of, well, if I can market my business and get enough exposure, then I can have a more demand for sales that will like allow me to continue on. And then as I can support